Hi, I'm Ruban Selvanayagam from Property Solvers. One of the most common decisions in modern buy-to-let is how to best hold the asset, personally or through a limited company. It's a question that shapes tax position, long-term planning, and overall viability of a buy-to-let portfolio, so it's worth unpacking properly. There's a lot of noise online about this. Much of it is outdated and overly simplistic, and in some cases downright misleading. So let's walk through the real picture as it stands today, based on actual numbers, modern tax rules, and 2 decades of active investing. Over a decade ago, the default choice for most landlords was to buy property in their personal name. Mortgage rates were cheaper, the tax rules were more favourable, and there was no real penalty for holding rental properties individually. That world started disappearing in 2015 when then Chancellor George Osborne introduced Section 24 in his summer budget. The changes didn't hit overnight, they were phased in from 2017 to 2020, but the direction of travel was clear from the moment the policy was announced. It was one of the most significant tax shifts that the private rental sector had ever seen, and its effects are still being felt today. Many of the loudest voices online still talk as if we're living in the pre-Section 24 landscape, but we're not. Modern buy-to-let requires modern structures. So let's start with the core issue, tax. Before I go any further, just a quick disclaimer. Tax is a highly personal area and the right structure depends on your wider income, your portfolio plans and your long-term goals. Everything I'm sharing here is general guidance based on experience, not formal tax advice. Always speak to a qualified accountant or tax specialist before making decisions about how you structure your buy-to-let investments. With that said, once you understand the basics of how rental income is taxed in your own name, the picture becomes much clearer. When you hold property personally, rental profits are treated as standard income. If you're a high rate taxpayer, that means 40%. And if you fall into the additional rate tax band, it's 45%. On the surface, that may seem expected, but when you combine it with the Section 4 restrictions on mortgage interest, the picture changes completely. Section 24 prevents landlords holding property personally from deducting mortgage interest as a normal business expense. Instead of being taxed on your true profit, you're taxed on a higher, effectively artificial figure, and given only partial credit afterwards. The result is that many thousands of landlords across the UK are paying tax on income they never actually keep. It's an issue we've seen repeatedly, especially from landlords who've been in the game for a while and are looking at selling up. And it catches people off guard because it goes against basic business logic. Inside the limited company, none of this applies. A limited company is a business, and from the eyes of the HMRC, it can deduct every legitimate cost, including mortgage interest, before calculating taxable profit. What you end up paying is corporation tax on the actual money left after expenses, not an inflated number. And although corporation tax rates have increased, most SME property companies sit well within the lower or tapered brackets. The argument that I hear out there that company tax is going up so it's no longer worth it doesn't hold up when personal ownership is still affected by Section 24, as personally owned landlords are taxed on a figure that doesn't reflect their true after-interest profit. Many established landlords also operate through multiple special purpose vehicles, SPVs for short. An SPV is a simple limited company set up for a specific property or a small group of assets. It keeps each investment ring-fenced, gives lenders a clearer picture of the company's activity, and makes it easier to structure finance, ownership and risk on a property-by-property basis. It's a far more organised approach than blending everything into personal ownership. A lot of commentators try to debunk limited companies by claiming that once you take money out, dividend tax cancels out the benefit. This is usually said by people who either don't invest personally or don't understand how property portfolios actually grow. The vast majority of professional landlords don't withdraw all of their profit each year. Instead, surplus funds are typically reinvested, used to reduce borrowing, built up as reserves, or directed towards future acquisitions. A company structure is the most efficient environment for doing that because you've kept far more of your capital inside the business instead of handing 40% of it over to HMRC every year. Even when profits are taken out of the company, the overall tax position can still be more efficient. Dividends are taxed at lower rates than personal income, and the annual dividend allowance provides an additional buffer. Shareholdings can be split between spouses, withdrawals can be timed, and profits can simply remain in the company until extraction is more sensible from a tax planning perspective. Personal ownership doesn't offer this kind of flexibility. Another major advantage is long-term planning, particularly around inheritance tax. Property held personally forms part of the estate and is difficult to restructure. A company, on the other hand, offers far more scope. Different classes of shares, growth shares, gradual family involvement, and other long-term planning strategies that can materially reduce exposure to inheritance tax. It's a far more adaptable framework for anyone thinking beyond the next few years. Another area worth clarifying is liability. Some people will tell that using a limited company gives you full protection because the company owns the property, not you. The truth is a bit more nuanced. Yes, the company shields certain types of personal exposure, but in almost every case, lenders will still require a personal guarantee, and increasingly they also insist on independent legal advice, or ILA. This is a short meeting with a solicitor who confirms that the director understands the guarantee, the risks involved, and the fact that personal assets could still be pursued if the company doesn't meet its obligations. It's an extra layer of formality rather than a drawback, and it's now standard practice across most buy-to-let lenders. So whilst the corporate wrapper does provide additional protection and professionalism, it's not a magic barrier. It is, however, a far better structure for ring-fencing risk across multiple properties. Now let's take a look at the practical side of finance. Some years ago, limited company mortgages were noticeably more expensive. The choice was limited and lenders weren't particularly interested. Today, that's changed. There's a deeper market for limited company buy-to-let products, and the gap between personal and limited company rates continues to narrow, particularly as lenders are now competing amongst themselves. So is there ever a reason to buy-to-let in your own name? Yes, but only in a limited set of circumstances. If you're a basic rate taxpayer planning to buy one or two low-geared or even mortgage-free rental properties, with no intention of building a portfolio, no interest in inheritance tax planning, and no need to ring-fence liability, then personal ownership can be fine. Even at the early stages, many want the option to grow, reinvest profits, and carry out coherent long-term planning. Personal ownership doesn't provide that foundation, and once a property is held in an individual's name, restructuring later can trigger both stamp duty and capital gains tax, making it costly or in some cases unrealistic. A limited company, by contrast, creates a more professional framework from day one. It keeps the investment activity separate from personal affairs, and it's the structure lenders, advisors, and institutional investors increasingly expect to see. Shares can be reorganised or passed on more easily, financing arrangements tend to be cleaner, and long-term planning, whether that involves expansion, succession, or bringing in future partners, is far more flexible. The idea that ownership is somehow compromised simply because the company holds the title is a misconception. All meaningful control still sits with the shareholder. For anyone building more than a single low-geared rental, the company route is generally the stronger, more robust choice. The tax position is clearer, the planning advantages are substantial, and the impact of Section 24 has made personal ownership markedly less efficient than it once was. I really hope you found this video useful. Feel free to like and subscribe, and there's plenty more coming on investing property in general, structures, taxation, and navigating the modern buy-to-let landscape. A massive thanks for watching.